I came to save souls on a world where survival devours faith. The Emperor's light guided me through the void, across distances that break human comprehension, to a planet classified as Death World in Imperial records. My name was Sister Evangeline Maron of the Missionarius Galaxia, trained on shrine worlds where devotion came as naturally as breathing. I believed the Emperor's protection was absolute, that faith could overcome any obstacle. Vorago Prime taught me otherwise. Some darkness is hungry enough to swallow even divine radiance. Now I am neither sister nor truly Evangeline, bearer of good news. I am testament to what happens when certainty meets a world that feeds on conviction itself. The shrine world of Ophelia 7 existed in a state of perpetual devotion. Every structure reached toward the heavens like a prayer made stone. Every citizen participated in rituals that marked the passage of hours, days, seasons. I was born there, in the shadow of the Cathedral of Saint Aspira, delivered by midwives who chanted litanies of safe passage as my mother labored. My first sounds were hymns. My first words were prayers. The ecclesiarchy claimed me at age 4, as they claimed all children who showed particular aptitude for memorization and devotion. I remember the testing. A robed priest asking me to recite passages from the Imperial Creed after hearing them once. I repeated them perfectly, not understanding the words but recognizing their importance from the reverence with which they were spoken. My parents wept with joy when the priest marked my forehead with sacred oils, declaring me suitable for ecclesiastical training. The Schola Ministorum became my home. The other children became my siblings in faith, if not in blood. We rose before dawn for prayers, studied Imperial theology until midday, practiced devotional calligraphy in the afternoon, and ended each day with evening vespers that lasted until our young voices grew hoarse. The training was rigorous, but not cruel. Our instructors genuinely believed they were preparing us for the Emperor's service, that suffering in education would spare us greater suffering in the field. I excelled at theological studies, while other students struggled with the paradoxes inherent in Imperial faith, the questions that seemed to trouble even our instructors. I found comfort in certainty. The Emperor protects. Faith is its own shield. Doubt is the first step toward heresy. These principles required no proof because they were axiomatically true. To question them was to question existence itself. By age 16, I had memorized 17 different translations of the Imperial Creed, could recite the Litany of Protection in High Gothic without error, and had begun studying the specific challenges of missionary work on frontier worlds. The Missionarius Galaxia represented the ecclesiarchy's effort to spread the Imperial faith to every human population in the galaxy, no matter how remote or primitive. It was dangerous work. The instructors never hid that truth from us, but they framed danger as opportunity for martyrdom, and martyrdom as the highest form of service. During my 18th year, I was permitted to attend a sermon delivered by a missionary who had returned from a feral world on the eastern fringe. He was ancient, his body bent from decades of harsh conditions, his face scarred by exposure to a sun far more intense than Ophelia 7's gentle star. But his eyes burned with zealous fire as he described converting an entire tribe of primitives who had worshipped their world's predators as gods. He spoke of the moment they accepted the Emperor's truth, how they fell to their knees in recognition of a higher power, how their false idols crumbled before genuine faith. The cathedral erupted in applause and prayer. I wept openly, moved by the story's spiritual beauty. That night, I prayed for the first time not for my own salvation but for the opportunity to bring salvation to others. The selection for missionary service came during my 22nd year. I had completed advanced theological studies and received basic medical training, as all missionaries did. The latter seemed almost insulting to my devotion. If the Emperor protects, why would I need to understand wound treatment and disease prevention? But I trusted that my superiors understood the Emperor's will better than I did. The selection process involved 3 months of evaluation, psychological assessments to determine resilience, physical conditioning to prepare us for harsh environments, theological examinations to ensure doctrinal purity, and interviews with senior missionaries and ecclesiarchy officials who asked questions designed to probe the depth of our faith. One interview I remember with particular clarity. The interrogator was a cardinal whose name I was never told, his face hidden behind an ornate mask of gold and ivory. He asked me a single question. What would you do if you brought the Emperor's word to a population that rejected it completely, that suffered terribly despite your presence, that seemed to thrive only when they ignored your teachings? I answered without hesitation. I would redouble my efforts, Your Eminence. The fault would lie in my delivery, not in the message itself. The Emperor's word is truth, absolute. Rejection indicates only that I have failed to communicate that truth effectively. The cardinal was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You show necessary resilience and inflexible faith. You are suitable for the most challenging assignments." I took this as the highest compliment. I did not understand it was a diagnosis. My assignment came 3 weeks later. Vorago Prime, a death world in the Segmentum Pacificus. The name meant nothing to me. Death worlds were common enough in Imperial classification, planets where the environment proved so hostile that only the strongest humans could survive. I assumed it would be difficult, but manageable. The Emperor had guided humanity across 1,000,000 worlds. What was one more? The preparation began immediately. 6 months of intensive training focused specifically on death world conditions. I learned to operate void suit modifications that could filter toxic atmospheres. I studied survival techniques for environments ranging from frozen tundra to volcanic plains. I practiced with the equipment I would carry. A portable shrine that could be assembled in hostile conditions, missionary texts printed on materials that could survive extreme temperatures and moisture, a Rosarius force field generator for personal protection, and a voxcaster for emergency communication. The theological preparation intensified as well. Hours, each day spent in meditation on martyrdom, on accepting death as natural conclusion to faithful service. We were shown propaganda picts of previous missionaries, their images preserved in stained glass and devotional paintings. Some had converted entire worlds. Others had died within days of landing. Both outcomes were presented as equally valuable to the Imperium. I requested access to reports from previous missionaries to Vorago Prime, seeking to learn from their experiences. The librarian provided me with heavily redacted documents. Most text was blacked out, leaving only fragments. Hostile environment confirmed. Indigenous population observed but not contacted. Missionary designation Gamma 73 ceased transmission after 47 days. The redactions frustrated me, but I assumed they contained tactical information not relevant to spiritual work. During the final month of preparation, I was assigned a missionary handler named Proctor Kelline. He was an older man who had accompanied dozens of missionaries to their assignments without ever setting foot on the worlds themselves. His role was to manage logistics, maintain communication with ecclesiarchy authorities, and recover any valuable materials if a missionary died in the field. Kelline was the first person to suggest my mission might not succeed. We were reviewing supply manifests when he said, casually, "Vorago Prime has quite a record." "Record?" I asked. 17 missionaries in the past century. None successful. Most dead within the first year. The information struck me like a physical blow. 17 missionaries. 17 failures. I wanted to ask why they kept sending people to a world that seemed immune to conversion, but the question felt dangerously close to doubting the ecclesiarchy's wisdom. "Perhaps," I said carefully, "the 18th will succeed where others failed." Kelline gave me a look I could not interpret at the time. Pity, perhaps, or resignation. Perhaps. he agreed, but without conviction. The final blessing came from the cardinal who had interviewed me months earlier. The ceremony took place in the Cathedral of Saint Aspira, the same cathedral that had dominated my childhood. I knelt before the altar while the cardinal anointed me with sacred oils and recited prayers for my protection. The ritual should have been uplifting, but it felt more like a funeral. The cardinal's prayers emphasized sacrifice and martyrdom more than success or conversion. When he pressed the sacred seal to my forehead, marking me officially as a missionary of the ecclesiarchy, his hands trembled slightly. "Go with the Emperor's light," he said. "And remember that service takes many forms. Sometimes we convert, sometimes we witness, sometimes we simply endure." I did not understand why endurance alone would be valuable. A missionary's purpose was conversion, not mere survival. But I nodded and accepted his blessing. The departure came 3 days later. The missionary vessel was small and ancient, its hull scarred by countless journeys through the warp. The crew consisted of a navigator whose face I never saw, hidden behind veils and masks, a handful of ratings who maintained the ship's basic systems, and Proctor Kaline. The vessel was not designed for comfort. My quarters were a cell barely large enough to stand in, containing a cot, a small shrine, and storage for my equipment. As we translated into the warp, the familiar light of Ophelia 7's star disappeared, replaced by the nauseating non-colors of the Immaterium. The Gellerfields held, keeping the horrors of the warp at bay, but I could feel their presence like pressure against my skull. The first week I spent in constant prayer, reciting every litany I had memorized to drown out the whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Kaline checked on me regularly, bringing nutrient paste that served as food and ensuring I maintained basic hygiene. During one visit, I asked him about the other missionaries who had gone to Vorago Prime. What had they been like? What mistakes had they made that I should avoid? He considered the question for a long time before answering. "They were faithful," he said finally. "Every one of them. Devoted, trained, certain of their purpose. If faith alone could convert a world, Vorago Prime would be the most devout planet in the Imperium. But faith does convert worlds," I insisted. "The Emperor's truth is irresistible when properly communicated." "Is it?" Kaline asked. "Or is that what we tell ourselves to make the failures easier to accept?" The question bordered on heresy. I should have reported it, should have rebuked him for such doubt. But something in his tone stopped me. He was not mocking faith or questioning the Emperor. He was questioning whether faith functioned the way the ecclesiarchy claimed it did. The distinction was subtle, but significant. I spent the remaining weeks of the journey in a state of mental preparation. Each morning, I performed devotions before my small shrine. Each afternoon, I reviewed missionary doctrine and studied what little information existed about Vorago Prime. Each evening, I meditated on purpose and duty. The routine kept me focused, kept doubt at bay. We translated back to real space at the edge of the Vorago system. Through the small viewport in my cell, I caught my first glimpse of my destination. Vorago Prime hung in the black like a mottled green and brown jewel, its surface obscured by massive storm systems that never seemed to dissipate. Even from orbit, the planet looked hostile. Beautiful in an abstract way, but hostile. The ship did not proceed directly to the planet. First, we stopped at a small outpost on Vorago Prime's single moon, a station maintained by a penal legion detachment assigned to monitor the Death World for any signs of exploitable resources or potential threats. The stopover would allow me to resupply and receive any final intelligence before descent. The station was cramped and poorly maintained, its corridors stinking of recycled air and unwashed bodies. The guardsmen stationed there were criminals serving out sentences, their faces marked with penal tattoos, and their eyes reflecting the desperate boredom of men assigned to watch a planet where nothing of importance ever happened. The commanding officer, A grizzled sergeant whose left arm had been replaced with a crude augmetic met with me in what passed for the station's command center. He looked at my missionary robes with something between amusement and contempt. "Another one," he said, not bothering with formal greeting. "You're the 18th, you know. We keep count. The Emperor's work is not measured in numbers," I replied, maintaining the dignity appropriate to my position. "No," he agreed, "but failure is. 17 dead missionaries. Not one successful conversion. Not one indigenous person brought into the Imperial fold. At what point does the ecclesiarchy decide the planet's not worth the effort? Every human soul is worth saving," I said, reciting doctrine automatically. The sergeant snorted. "Those aren't souls down there. They're animals. Smart animals, sure, but animals. They survive by being vicious, adaptable, and completely without higher thought. You want to convert them. You'd have better luck converting the predators they hunt." His words angered me, but I suppressed the emotion. "Once," he said, "supply drop went wrong, crashed in the jungle. Took us 3 days to recover the cargo. Lost 2 men to things I still don't have names for. The indigenous people watched us the whole time. Never helped. Never attacked. Just watched us bleed and die like it was entertainment. They're not cruel, sister. They're just completely indifferent to anything that doesn't immediately threaten or feed them. Then I will teach them that the Emperor threatens their souls and feeds their spirits," I said with more confidence than I felt. The sergeant shrugged. "Your funeral. We'll monitor your Vox transmissions when we can, but the atmosphere plays hell with communications. If something goes wrong, don't expect rescue. Best we can do is recover your body and equipment after you're dead." The conversation haunted me during the final preparations for descent. The sergeant's casual acceptance of my likely death, his matter-of-fact description of the indigenous population's indifference, the revelation that 17 missionaries had preceded me to failure or death. Everything about this assignment felt wrong in ways I could not articulate. Proctor Kaline helped me load into the drop pod that would carry me to the surface. The pod was a modified missionary design, ornate with religious iconography, but fundamentally a reinforced metal capsule designed to survive violent atmospheric entry. My equipment was secured in shock-resistant containers. I was strapped into the pod's single seat, my missionary robes awkward in the confined space. Before sealing the pod, Kaline looked at me with an expression I would remember for years afterward. "Sister Evangeline," he said quietly, "you're a good woman. Faithful, devoted, sincere. I've escorted a lot of missionaries, and you're better than most. I want you to remember something." "What?" I asked. "The Emperor protects those who protect themselves. Faith is not a substitute for competence. If you have to choose between doctrine and survival, choose survival. The ecclesiarchy can always send another missionary." His words were borderline heretical, suggesting that survival might matter more than faith. I should have rejected them. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Thank you, Proctor." He sealed the pod without another word. I heard the clamps release, felt the sudden vertigo of free fall as the pod separated from the ship, and then the universe became fire and violence as I entered Vorago Prime's atmosphere. The landing was violence incarnate. Despite the drop pod's shock absorption systems and my restraint harness, the impact drove the breath from my lungs and left me gasping in the sudden stillness that followed. Warning runes flashed across the pod's internal display, indicating damage to external sensors and a compromised starboard seal. The air that hissed through the breach carried smells I had never encountered. Rotting vegetation, animal musk, and something else. Something organic and predatory that my brain could not categorize. I released the harness with trembling hands and activated the pod's exit mechanism. The door blew outward with explosive force, designed to clear debris. Harsh light flooded the interior, and with it came sound. So much sound. Screaming, chattering, buzzing, roaring, a cacophony of life and death happening simultaneously in every direction. My first step onto Vorago Prime nearly sent me sprawling. The ground was not ground as I understood it, but a thick mat of organic matter, living and dead intertwined so completely that distinguishing between them proved impossible. Roots writhed beneath my boots. Things that might have been insects or might have been something else entirely scattered at my presence. The air was so humid that breathing felt like drowning. The jungle canopy stretched above me, so dense that only fragments of the sky remained visible. The light that penetrated was green-tinted, filtered through layers of leaves the size of cargo containers. Every surface dripped with moisture. Every shadow could hide predators. The temperature was oppressive, my missionary robes already soaked with sweat, despite the void suit modifications meant to regulate body temperature. I took stock of my situation with growing dread. The drop pod had crashed approximately 30 meters from its intended landing zone, judging by the furrow it had carved through the jungle floor. Equipment containers were scattered around the impact site, some intact, others split open with contents spilling into the organic muck. My portable shrine components were salvageable. The missionary texts appeared undamaged, protected by their sealed cases. The Voxcaster, however, had sustained serious damage during landing. Its casing was cracked, and when I attempted activation, only static emerged. I spent the first hour recovering equipment and establishing a basic perimeter around the drop pod. The pod itself would serve as shelter until I could construct something more permanent. Its armored hull would protect against most environmental threats. I activated the Rosarius force field generator, creating a shimmering barrier that extended 5 meters in every direction. The device's power cell indicator showed full charge, enough for approximately 72 continuous hours of operation or 300 brief activations. As I worked, I became aware of being observed. Nothing obvious, no shapes visible in the undergrowth, but the sensation was undeniable. Eyes watching my every movement. Intelligence assessing my capabilities. I called out in High Gothic, then Low Gothic, announcing myself as an emissary of the God Emperor. Come in peace to bring enlightenment. My words vanished into the jungle's noise without apparent effect. The first night on Vorago Prime nearly killed me. I had secured myself inside the drop pod, sealing the compromised hatch as best I could. I performed evening prayers by the light of a glow globe, reciting the litany of protection and asking the Emperor to shield me through the darkness. Then I attempted to sleep, exhausted from the day's efforts. The swarm came at what I estimated was 3 hours past midnight. I woke to a sound like rainfall, thousands of tiny impacts against the drop pod's hull. Through the small viewport, I could see them. Flying creatures each the size of a human fist, their bodies segmented like insects but moving with vertebrate coordination. They covered every surface, probing for entry points, their mandibles capable of chewing through anything organic and even some metals given sufficient time. The compromised seal began to fail. The first creatures squeezed through, and I watched in horror as they immediately sought out any exposed flesh. I activated the Rosarius in desperation. The force field snapped into existence, and the creatures inside its radius were instantly vaporized by the energy discharge. The swarm outside retreated, unable to penetrate the barrier. I stood within that shimmering field for 6 hours while the swarm tested its perimeter. The Rosarius power cell drained from full charge to 30%. When dawn finally came and the swarm dispersed, retreating to whatever nests spawned them, I understood a fundamental truth about Vorago Prime. The planet did not kill through dramatic predation or single catastrophic events. It killed through attrition, through constant pressure, through 10,000 small threats that accumulated until even the strongest defenses crumbled. Morning revealed the jungle in greater detail, and that detail inspired no confidence. Every plant species competed for survival with the same desperation as animal life. I watched a vine strangle a tree over the course of hours. saw flowers that snapped shut on insects with mechanical precision, observed root systems that actively hunted through the soil for nutrients. The distinction between flora and fauna seemed arbitrary here. Everything consumed, everything defended, everything killed. I spent the second day attempting to establish a sustainable camp. I assembled the portable shrine components, creating a small altar adorned with the Aquila and devotional texts. I rationed food supplies and tested the water purification system on samples from a nearby stream. The purifier worked, but slowly, and the water it produced tasted of minerals and organic compounds that defied complete filtration. That afternoon, I saw my first indigenous person, a figure in the canopy, moving with impossible grace from branch to branch 30 meters above the ground. The person was humanoid, clearly descended from baseline human stock, but adapted in ways that shocked me. Lean to the point of emaciation by shrine world standards, every muscle visible beneath skin darkened by constant sun exposure. Scars covered every visible surface, pale lines against darker flesh. A roadmap of survival written in scar tissue. I called out, raising my hands to show I carried no weapons. The figure paused, regarded me with an expression I could not interpret, then disappeared into the canopy with such speed that I questioned whether I had truly seen them at all. Over the following days, the observations increased in frequency and boldness. I would catch glimpses of watchers in the undergrowth, see signs of their passage in disturbed vegetation, find evidence that they had approached my camp during the night. They were studying me as I wished to study them, but with far greater caution. On the 5th day, I found an offering. A small carcass, already cleaned and butchered, left on a flat stone near my camp perimeter. The creature resembled nothing I had seen before, its hide covered in bony plates, its teeth designed for crushing rather than tearing. Someone had killed it, processed it, and left it for me, a gift or a test. I could not determine. I accepted the offering with prayer, thanking the Emperor for his providence and asking that he guide the hearts of those who provided this sustenance. I cooked the meat over a small fire, finding it tough but edible, tasting of the same organic intensity that characterized everything on Vorago Prime. As I ate, I felt eyes watching from the darkness beyond my fire's light. The next morning, the watchers had come closer. I could see them now without pretending not to. 3 figures positioned at the edge of the clearing where my drop pod rested. They made no attempt to hide, but also made no move to approach. We observed each other across 20 meters of hostile terrain, neither side willing to make the first definitive move. I began my daily devotions, performing the morning prayer ritual with deliberate visibility. I knelt before the portable shrine, made the sign of the Aquila, and recited the litany of faith in clear, projected tones. The watchers observed, without reaction. When I finished and rose, they had not moved. This pattern continued for weeks. Each day I performed my rituals visibly. Each day the watchers observed from their careful distance. Gradually, imperceptibly, they drew closer. 20 meters became 15. 15 became 10. I began to teach as I prayed, explaining each gesture's meaning in High Gothic and Low Gothic, using simple words and repetitive phrasing designed to facilitate comprehension. I taught them the word Emperor, repeating it constantly while pointing toward the sky. I taught them faith and protection and salvation, building a basic vocabulary of theological concepts. They listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, occasionally mimicking words back to me in their own language, sounds that lacked the structured grammar of Gothic but carried clear, intentional meaning. On the 33rd day, one of them approached within speaking distance. He was male, I determined, though gender seemed less pronounced among the Vorago-born than among Shrine World populations. Scars covered his face and arms. His left ear was missing, replaced by smooth scar tissue. He carried weapons I could finally see clearly. A spear with head carved from some creature's bone, a knife made from what appeared to be a predator's claw, and a sling woven from plant fibers. He spoke in his own tongue, sounds that rose and fell with tonal variation that changed meaning. I could not understand the words, but his gestures were clear. He pointed at me, then at himself, then made a walking motion with his fingers. I gathered my bolt pistol, the only weapon I carried, and secured my most valuable equipment inside the drop pod. Then I followed him into the jungle, away from the relative safety of my camp, trusting that the Emperor's hand guided this moment toward conversion. The journey to the village took 3 hours, though we covered perhaps only 2 kilometers. My guide moved through the jungle with practiced efficiency, reading danger in signs I could not perceive. Twice, he stopped abruptly and redirected our path around areas that appeared identical to everywhere else. Once, he froze completely. Hand raised in a gesture I understood meant absolute stillness. We stood motionless for 10 minutes while something massive moved through the canopy above us, its passage marked by creaking branches and falling debris. Only when silence returned did we continue. The village, when we reached it, was nearly invisible. I had walked within 50 meters of it during my initial explorations without detecting any sign of human habitation. The settlement existed within and beneath a massive tree root system. The roots themselves hollowed out and reinforced to create dwelling spaces. Camouflage was so complete that even standing at its entrance, my eyes struggled to distinguish artificial structures from natural growth. The population emerged as we entered, perhaps 200 individuals, ranging from infants to elders who appeared ancient by any standard. Every person bore scars. Many showed signs of old injuries that had healed incorrectly, leaving limbs twisted or joints that moved with visible pain. The children, I noted with growing horror, were already scarred. Life here began with violence and never relented. My guide spoke to an elder woman, gesturing toward me while producing sounds I was beginning to recognize as their language's rhythmic patterns. The woman approached, her gait uneven from what appeared to be a badly healed leg fracture. Her eyes were sharp despite her age, assessing me with the same careful attention I had received from all the Vorago-born. She reached out and touched my missionary robes, rubbing the fabric between calloused fingers, testing its quality and durability. She spoke, and my guide translated through gesture and pantomime. They wanted to know why I had come. What purpose brought Skyfall into their world? I attempted to explain through the limited vocabulary we shared and elaborate gesturing. I spoke of the Emperor, of faith, of salvation. I pointed skyward to indicate his throne beyond the stars. I made the sign of the Aquila and tried to convey the concept of divine protection. They listened with polite attention but without comprehension. The elder woman asked a question my guide translated through, pointing at various objects and making questioning sounds. I eventually understood. Could my emperor words stop the night hunter? Could faith protect against the clawed death? Could prayers make water safe or food abundant? When I could not answer affirmatively with concrete demonstrations, interest visibly waned. They were not hostile or dismissive, merely practical. Words without immediate survival value held no priority. Over the following weeks, I established permanent presence in the village. They provided me with a dwelling space, a hollowed root section near the settlement's edge. In exchange, I offered what I could. Medical knowledge from my Shola training, treatment for wounds and infections using supplies from my missionary kit, and knowledge of High Gothic, which some showed interest in learning for reasons I did not fully understand. I began conducting daily services. Each morning at dawn, I assembled the portable shrine in the village's central clearing and performed devotions. Initially, no one attended. Then a few children came, drawn by curiosity about the outsiders' strange rituals. Adults followed eventually, not from religious interest but from desire to supervise their children and perhaps understand the Skyfallen's behavior. I taught them to make the sign of the Aquila, demonstrating the gesture repeatedly until they could replicate it. Most performed it incorrectly, fingers positioned wrong or movement incomplete. But I accepted these imperfect attempts as progress. I taught them to recite simple prayers in High Gothic, phrases they could not understand, but could memorize phonetically. The Emperor Protects became a common greeting, though they used it interchangeably with their own traditional greetings, apparently seeing no distinction in meaning. I explained the basic tenets of Imperial faith as simply as possible. There exists a God Emperor who watches over all humanity. He sits upon a golden throne beyond the sky, guiding and protecting his children. Faith in him provides spiritual sustenance and divine protection. Those who believe will be rewarded in this life and the next. Those who reject him face damnation. They listened to these teachings with the same polite attention they gave everything, nodding at appropriate moments, asking occasional questions through our developing shared vocabulary. But I began to recognize a troubling pattern. They treated my theology as interesting information, like learning about a distant land or unfamiliar creature, rather than as transformative truth. They participated in rituals not from belief, but from social courtesy, the same way they might share food or help repair a dwelling. One young hunter, who had begun attending services regularly, asked me directly about protection. His name, I had learned, was Kale. He had lost his younger sister to a predator attack 3 seasons prior and carried the loss visibly in his movements and expressions. "You speak Emperor Protection," he said in our hybrid language of Gothic words and Vorago grammar. "Sister, taken by clawed death. Where was protection?" I explained that the Emperor's protection was spiritual, not always physical. That sometimes he called the faithful home to serve at his side. That suffering in this life was temporary, but faith was eternal. The theological explanations that had satisfied me throughout my training sounded hollow when spoken to a young man whose sister had been devoured by a jungle predator. Kale considered my words seriously, as he considered all things. "Emperor calls faithful home," he repeated. "But sister not know Emperor. You not here then. So Emperor calls home, person who not know Emperor exists?" The logical inconsistency trapped me. I attempted to explain the concept of the Emperor's universal love, how it extended even to those who did not know him consciously. But Kale's question had exposed a fundamental problem with my missionary approach. How could I promise protection through faith to people who had survived for generations without it? What evidence could I provide that faith offered advantages over the practical survival knowledge that kept them alive daily? The elder woman I had met upon arrival, whose name I learned as Mara, asked me pointed questions during a conversation weeks into my residence. We sat in her dwelling, while rain thundered against the root ceiling, water seeping through gaps in quantities that would have flooded any shrine world structure, but which seemed normal here. "Sky fallen before you spoke same words," she said, her Gothic improving rapidly. "Spoke of Emperor, of protection, of faith. Stayed 2 years. Good person, helped with injuries, taught words, performed ceremonies. What happened to them?" I asked, eager for information about my predecessor. Dry season came. Fire from sky struck forest. Fire spreads fast, kills everything in path. We run, always run from skyfire. Skyfallen would not leave shrine things. Said faith required staying, that Emperor would protect. We told them come or burn. They stayed. She paused, her scarred face showing an emotion I interpreted as sadness mixed with incomprehension. They burned. We saved shrine things after fire passed. Metal survived. The revelation struck me physically. My predecessor had died choosing faith over survival, trusting that divine protection would overcome natural disaster. The Vorago-born had recovered the missionary equipment but not the missionary, suggesting they had made no attempt at rescue once the fire made survival impossible. They had respected the missionary's choice while considering it fundamentally irrational. "You think they foolish?" I asked. Mara considered carefully before responding. "Foolish is wrong word," They believed thing more than life. We believe life most important. Different thinking. She looked at me directly. You believe same. You choose faith over survival. I wanted to answer yes immediately, to affirm that faith was indeed more valuable than physical life. But the words caught in my throat. Would I burn rather than abandon my portable shrine? Would I choose devotion over continued opportunity to convert? The question was not theoretical. Vorago Prime would eventually place me in exactly such situations. I believe the Emperor provides wisdom to distinguish between necessary sacrifice and pointless death, I said carefully. Mara's expression suggested this answer satisfied her more than absolute certainty would have. Good, she said. Wisdom keeps alive. Certainty kills. The months accumulated with agonizing slowness. I maintained my daily services, my theological instruction, my visible devotion. The Vorago-born participated with increasing familiarity, learning prayers and gestures, and even some theological concepts. But participation never transformed into genuine belief. They treated the Imperial faith as a cultural practice belonging to me, rather than a universal truth meant for all humanity. I watched them prepare for hunts without prayer. They ventured into the jungle's most dangerous regions without asking for divine protection. When they returned successful, they thanked each other and the tools they carried. Never the Emperor. When they returned unsuccessful or injured, they analyzed what went wrong tactically, never questioning whether their lack of faith had caused the failure. Their spiritual beliefs, I gradually learned, were minimal and entirely practical. They believed Vorago itself was alive in some sense, that the planet tested all life constantly, and that survival meant passing these tests through competence rather than appeasing any divine force. Death was simply failure, no afterlife, no cosmic judgment, just cessation. This worldview was so fundamentally materialistic that my attempts to introduce concepts of soul and salvation found no conceptual framework to attach to. Kael became my most frequent conversation partner, partly because his Gothic was among the best in the village, and partly because he seemed genuinely interested in understanding my perspective, even when he disagreed with it. During a hunt where he allowed me to accompany the party, moving slowly to accommodate my inferior jungle skills, he asked about my world. I described Ophelia 7 as best I could: cities of cathedral spires, reaching toward heaven, populations in the billions living in devotion and purpose, technology that made survival effortless, allowing focus on spiritual development, art and music dedicated entirely to glorifying the Emperor, a world where faith was not questioned because its truth was self-evident in daily life. Kael listened with fascination. "Sounds like paradise," he said. "No hunting, no fighting to survive, just worship. It is paradise." I agreed. The reward for proper faith and imperial citizenship. "Then why leave?" he asked. "Why come to Vorago if paradise exists elsewhere?" The question should have had an easy answer. Because bringing faith to the faithless was the highest calling. Because the Emperor demanded his word spread to all humanity. Because paradise was meaningless if not shared. But speaking those answers to someone who daily risked death just to eat, whose paradise would be simply not being attacked for a single day, made them sound obscene. "To help you," I said finally. "To bring you the peace faith provides." Kael was silent for a long time as we moved through the jungle. Then he said, "I think your paradise would kill us. We survive by doubting, by questioning, by changing. Your world requires certainty. We cannot be certain and survive here. Maybe your faith works in paradise, but Vorago is not paradise. Vorago is test, and your faith fails test." His words haunted me through the following weeks. I watched the Vorago-born survive through exactly the qualities he described: constant adaptation, questioning everything, abandoning strategies that failed, and embracing new ones that worked. Meanwhile, my missionary work remained rigid, unchanging, certain. I performed the same prayers, taught the same doctrines, expected the same results despite evidence those results would never manifest. 6 months after my arrival, I had achieved precisely nothing of substance. The Vorago-born could recite prayers, make devotional gestures, and discuss theological concepts in broken High Gothic. But not one genuinely believed. Not one had experienced the transformative power of faith I had been taught was inevitable when the Emperor's truth encountered human souls. They humored me, learned from me, and protected me. The realization that I needed them far more than they needed me became undeniable. My survival depended entirely on their expertise and tolerance. Without their guidance, I would have died within days of landing. My medical knowledge and literacy had value, certainly, but not equivalent to the survival knowledge they provided. I was a dependent, not a savior, an interesting curiosity, not a transformative presence. During evening prayers one night, performing devotions to an audience of children who attended primarily because adults made them, I found myself speaking the familiar liturgies while my mind wandered elsewhere. The words had become automatic, repeated so often they carried no conscious thought. I watched the children mimic my gestures incorrectly, heard them mangle High Gothic pronunciation, and recognized they would forget everything I taught them the moment something more interesting appeared. This was failure. Absolute, undeniable failure. 6 months of effort had produced nothing but a small population of humans who could poorly imitate religious practices they did not understand or believe. And looking at their scarred faces, their pragmatic expressions, their complete adequacy without faith, I could not articulate why this failure felt less like tragedy and more like inevitable conclusion. The environmental shift began with subtle changes I did not recognize as warnings. The air grew heavier, pressing against my lungs with increased moisture. The sounds of the jungle altered in pitch and frequency, certain species falling silent, while others increased their calls to frantic intensity. The Vorago-born responded to these signs with practiced efficiency, reinforcing dwelling structures, moving supplies to elevated storage, preparing weapons I had not seen them carry before. Mara explained in our shared language, gesturing toward the darkening sky visible through gaps in the canopy. Wet season comes. Water falls without stopping. Ground becomes river. New hunters come from deep earth, from water places. Most dangerous time. I asked how long the wet season lasted. She held up both hands, fingers spread, then repeated the gesture twice. 20 days. I interpreted, though later I would learn she meant approximately 20 day-night cycles, the exact duration varying unpredictably. 20 days of constant rainfall in an environment already saturated with moisture seemed impossible. But I had learned not to doubt the Vorago-born's environmental knowledge. The rains began that night with a violence that suggested malice. Water fell, not in drops but in sheets, a continuous deluge that turned the air itself into a drowning medium. Within hours, the ground level transformed into a shallow sea, water rising until it reached knee-height across the entire settlement. The root-dwelling structures that had seemed like mere shelters revealed their true purpose as flood-resistant habitats, elevated just enough to remain above the rising water. I moved my essential equipment to higher ground, struggling against the current that had appeared where solid ground existed that morning. The portable shrine components I secured in my dwelling space. The missionary texts I wrapped in waterproof materials, though I noted with dismay that moisture penetrated even the supposedly sealed cases. My bolt pistol I cleaned and oiled repeatedly, fighting the humidity that threatened to rust its mechanisms. The Vorago-born adapted to the changed environment with remarkable speed. They moved through the flooded settlement on platforms of woven branches, navigating between dwellings without touching the water more than necessary. Children were confined to elevated spaces, watched constantly by adults who seemed even more vigilant than usual. Hunters ventured out in pairs or larger groups, never alone, carrying weapons I now recognized as designed specifically for aquatic threats. The first new predator I witnessed was something the Vorago-born called water razor. It resembled an eel if eels grew to 3 meters in length and possessed rows of crystalline teeth that could shear through flesh and bone with equal ease. One emerged from the flooded ground during the 3rd day of rains, attracted by vibrations from a hunter moving between dwellings. The attack was sudden and efficient, the creature lunging from beneath the water's surface toward the hunter's legs. The hunter reacted with speed born of experience, leaping upward to a platform while simultaneously driving a barbed spear into the water razor's head. The creature thrashed violently, its death throes so powerful they sent waves through the flooded settlement. Other hunters quickly butchered it, retrieving meat and processing the crystalline teeth for tools and weapons. The entire sequence, from attack to processing, lasted perhaps 10 minutes and was treated as routine occurrence. I attempted to conduct services during the wet season, but the rain's thunder made hearing impossible beyond a few meters. The Vorago-born had no interest in leaving their shelters for religious observation when doing so meant exposure to both drowning rainfall and aquatic predators. I found myself performing devotions alone in my dwelling, speaking liturgies to empty air while water seeped through the root ceiling in steady streams. The isolation forced contemplation I had successfully avoided through constant activity. 6 months of missionary work had produced nothing. The wet season demonstrated why faith held no value here. The Vorago-born survived through practical knowledge, through understanding their environment's patterns and responding appropriately. Prayer could not identify a water razor's approach. Faith could not reinforce a dwelling against floodwaters. Devotion could not process predator carcasses into tools and food. What could I offer them that held real value? My medical knowledge helped treat injuries but could not prevent the injuries that occurred constantly. My literacy had no application in a society without written language or time for documentation. My theological instruction entertained them occasionally, but provided no survival advantage. I was useful only as an additional set of hands for labor and as a curiosity that broke the monotony of their brutal existence. During the wet season's 2nd week, Mara visited my dwelling during a brief reduction in rainfall intensity. She moved carefully across the platforms, her injured leg making the journey difficult. When she arrived, soaked despite the short distance, she carried something wrapped in treated hide. "Night hunter comes soon," she said without preamble. "Most dangerous thing in Vorago. Comes only wet season. Takes 2, 3, sometimes more each time. Cannot fight. Can only hide. Stay silent. Hope it chooses someone else." She unwrapped the hide to reveal a simple wooden carving, abstract in form but clearly meant to represent something specific. "This is Night Hunter. Show children so they understand. Show you so you understand. When it comes, no sound, no movement, no emperor words." I took the carving, examining it by the dim light filtering through my dwelling's entrance. The representation suggested something massive, quadrupedal but with too many limbs, a body plan that defied natural evolution. "How do you know when it comes?" I asked. "We know," Mara said simply. "We feel it. Ground vibrates different. Water moves different. You will feel, also, maybe, when you feel silence, complete silence. It hunts by sound, by vibration, sees nothing in dark, smells nothing through rain, only hears." She departed after making me repeat back her instructions, confirming I understood the absolute necessity of silence. I spent that evening studying the carving, trying to imagine what evolutionary pressures would produce such a creature. Vorago Prime's ecosystem was so hostile that even its apex predators existed in constant competition, creating arms races of adaptation that resulted in nightmare biology. The night hunter came 3 days later. I felt it first as a change in vibration, a subsonic rumble that resonated through the root structure of my dwelling. The sensation was profoundly wrong, triggering instinctive dread that bypassed rational thought. Every creature capable of movement fled or hid, the jungle around the settlement falling into eerie silence, broken only by rainfall. I emerged from my dwelling despite Mara's instructions, unable to resist witnessing this apex predator. The Vorago-born had extinguished all lights and retreated into their dwellings, sealing entrances with whatever materials blocked sound. The settlement appeared abandoned, dark and silent except for the endless rain. The creature emerged from the jungle's depths, moving with impossible silence despite its size. It stood perhaps 5 meters tall at the shoulder, its body a grotesque fusion of predatory features from a dozen different species. 6 legs supported its bulk, each ending in claws designed for both climbing and tearing. Its head was eyeless, the skull dominated by elaborate sensory structures that trembled constantly, detecting the slightest vibration through air and water. Bioluminescent patches along its flanks pulsed slowly, lighting nothing but perhaps serving some purpose I could not comprehend. It moved through the flooded settlement with deliberate care, pausing every few meters to sample the environment with those elaborate sensors. I stood frozen on my dwelling's platform, hardly daring to breathe, watching it pass within 10 meters of my position. The urge to prey was overwhelming, automatic, a response to fear so deeply ingrained that suppressing it required physical effort. But I remembered Mara's warning. Sound brought death. The night hunter paused directly in front of the settlement's central area where I conducted daily services. Its sensory organs focused on something I could not perceive. Then it moved with sudden, terrible speed toward one of the dwellings on the settlement's far side. I heard a brief cry, abruptly silenced, then the sounds of tearing and consumption. The creature had found someone who made noise. Someone who could not maintain absolute silence. I should have remained still and silent. Instead, driven by missionary instinct and horror at witnessing murder, I began to pray. Not loudly, merely whispering the litany of protection, asking the Emperor to intervene, to save his children from this abomination. My Rosarius remained in my dwelling, its power cell long exhausted. I had only words, only faith, only certainty that divine power would manifest if properly invoked. The night hunter's sensory organs snapped toward my position with mechanical precision. It abandoned its kill instantly, moving toward me with speed that seemed impossible for something so massive. I froze mid-prayer, understanding too late that my faith had just summoned death. A figure launched from a nearby platform, tackling me off my feet and sending us both into the flooded water below. We submerged completely, the impact driving air from my lungs. Strong hands gripped me, pulling me through the water toward the space beneath a dwelling's elevated floor. We surfaced in a pocket of air, and I recognized Kale's face centimeters from mine, his expression containing rage and terror in equal measure. Above us, the night hunter investigated the platform where I had stood moments before. Its sensory organs swept the area, detecting nothing now that we had stopped moving and making sound. We remained motionless in the water. Kale's hand pressed over my mouth to ensure silence, while the creature searched for the source of the vibrations my prayer had created. Time became meaningless. We might have hidden for minutes or hours, impossible to determine while focused entirely on absolute stillness and silence. Eventually, the night hunter moved away, returning to its interrupted feeding. When it finally departed, leaving the settlement and returning to whatever deep jungle lair spawned it, Kyle released me with a violent shove that sent me sprawling in the shallow water. "My brother," he said, voice thick with barely controlled fury. "It took my brother." He moved, tried to protect child hiding in his dwelling, made sound. Night hunter came. "And then you make sound with your emperor words. Draw it away from feeding." My brother used moment to throw child to safety. Night hunter took him instead. Other Vorago-born emerged from hiding, moving toward the dwelling where the attack occurred. I followed, compelled by guilt and horror. What remained was barely recognizable as having once been human. The night hunter fed efficiently, consuming everything with nutritional value and discarding the rest. Mara stood over the remains, her expression containing grief but also a terrible resignation. "Jorik," she said simply. The name meant nothing to me, but to the assembled Vorago-born it clearly carried significance. Several people wept quietly, grief expressed through silent tears rather than vocal mourning. Even in sorrow, they made no unnecessary sound. I attempted to perform funeral rites, to honor the dead man's sacrifice and provide comfort through religious ceremony. Mara stopped me with a raised hand. "No," she said flatly. "No emperor words, no ceremonies. He is gone. Vorago takes all. We remember, we survive. We do not waste time with words that change nothing. But his soul," I protested. "His sacrifice should be honored. The Emperor values such martyrdom. His soul." Mara's voice carried an edge I had not heard before. "He had life. Now no life, no soul, no Emperor, no honor. Just death. Death because you made sound. Death because your faith says words more important than silence." The accusation was unjust. I wanted to argue. I had not known Jorik was defending someone. I had not understood my prayers would attract the predator. My intentions were pure, seeking only to invoke divine protection. But intentions meant nothing to the dead man being wrapped in treated hide for disposal. Results were all that mattered, and the result was that my faith had directly contributed to his death. 2 others had died during the night hunter's visit. An elderly woman whose breathing grew too labored to suppress completely, and a child who panicked and cried out when the creature came close. 3 deaths, attributed by some to my prayer drawing the predator to the settlement, by others to inevitable losses during wet season. The distinction felt meaningless. I had made sound when silence was required, and people died because of it. The Vorago-born did not banish me or harm me in retaliation. They simply stopped attending services, stopped asking questions about theology, stopped treating my presence as anything but obligation to protect a dependent who had proven dangerous through ignorance. I had become liability rather than asset, tolerated only because abandoning me would violate their pragmatic ethics. Kael avoided me entirely for days. When we finally spoke again, during the wet season's final week, his first words were, "Brother asked about you, day before Night Hunter came, asked if you truly believed Emperor protects." "I do believe," I said quietly. "I believed I was helping." And I told him, "Yes, you believe completely. No doubt, no question." Said maybe such certainty was good. Maybe we could learn from it. His voice was hollow, scraped clean of emotion. He believed me. Believed certainty could be good. And certainty killed him. I had no response that would not sound like excuse or justification. Kael continued, "You teach Emperor protects faithful, but brother was not faithful, did not know Emperor. You say faith is protection, but you prayed and drew death. Your words contradict your beliefs. Which is truth? That faith protects, or that faith kills?" The question was the same one I had been asking myself since watching Jorik die. Everything I had been taught insisted faith provided protection, that divine power manifested for the faithful, that prayer was shield against darkness. But Vorago Prime had demonstrated repeatedly that faith offered no protection whatsoever. Prayer did not stop predators. Devotion did not prevent injury or death. Certainty did not enable survival. "I don't know," I admitted, the first time I had spoken those words regarding matters of faith in my entire life. Kael nodded, as if this was the answer he had expected, perhaps even hoped for. Not knowing is beginning. Knowing comes after. Maybe you learn, maybe not. He walked away without further comment. leaving me to contemplate what learning would require and whether I was capable of it. The wet season ended as abruptly as it began. The rain ceased during the night, and morning revealed a changed landscape. The floodwaters receded rapidly, draining into underground channels. The species that had emerged during the deluge retreated back to their aquatic habitats. Different predators emerged to claim the transformed territory, beginning new cycles of predation and survival. The Vorago-born counted their losses and began recovery. 3 dead was considered acceptable for a wet season. Previous years had been worse, I was told. They processed the Night Hunter's violence with the same pragmatism they applied to all death, mourning briefly and then moving forward because survival demanded constant attention. I could not process it so easily. The guilt over my role in Jorek's death, however indirect, consumed my thoughts. I had come to save souls, to bring light and protection through faith. Instead, I had brought nothing but danger to people who had shown me only hospitality and patience. My presence made them less safe, not more. My teachings provided no benefit while carrying demonstrable risk. For the first time since landing on Vorago Prime, I questioned whether the Emperor's will truly guided my mission, or whether I was simply following institutional doctrine that bore no relationship to divine intent. The transformation from wet season to dry came with shocking speed. Within days, the saturated jungle began to desiccate. The oppressive humidity that had made breathing difficult evaporated, replaced by air so dry it cracked lips and parched throats. Water sources that had overflowed during the deluge shrank to muddy trickles, then disappeared entirely. The canopy, previously dripping with constant moisture, began to shed leaves in quantities that carpeted the forest floor. Mara explained the necessity of migration during a gathering where the entire settlement assembled to discuss survival strategy. Water exists in Canyon region, 30 kilometers toward rising sun. Permanent source, flows from deep earth. We go there, each dry season. Return when wet season begins. Journey takes 20 days with full population. Dangerous. But staying here means death by thirst. I understood immediately that I would accompany them. No choice existed. My water purification system could not function without water to purify, and the settlement's supplies would not sustain even the Vorago-born population through the dry season's duration. I had survived the wet season. Now I would face a completely different set of challenges. The preparation consumed 3 days. Every person carried supplies according to their capacity. Adults bore weapons, tools, and preserved food. Children old enough to walk carried water containers fashioned from treated animal bladders. Even the elderly contributed, though their loads were lighter and they received assistance from stronger members. I packed my essential missionary equipment, abandoning everything not absolutely necessary. The portable shrine stayed behind, too heavy to justify its transport. The missionary texts came with me, along with my bolt pistol, medical supplies, and journal. The journey began at dawn, the entire population moving in a loose formation that maximized vigilance while allowing flexibility. Hunters ranged ahead and to the flanks, scouting for threats and identifying safe paths. I walked near the center of the formation, surrounded by children and elders who required protection. My position reflected my status, dependent rather than contributor. Someone to be guarded rather than someone who guarded others. The terrain shifted constantly as we traveled. Dense jungle gave way to more open forest, which transitioned to scrubland where vegetation grew sparse and hostile. Every plant bore thorns or toxins or both. Every clearing hid predators adapted to ambush tactics. The Vorago-born moved through this hostile landscape with practiced efficiency, reading danger signs I could not perceive and avoiding threats before they materialized. On the 3rd day, we crossed a region of ash plains where volcanic vents released toxic gases in unpredictable patterns. The ground itself was treacherous, hardened ash that crumbled beneath weight, concealing vents that could release superheated steam without warning. The Vorago-born navigated by scent and subtle visual cues, following paths that wound between danger zones with minimal clearance. I struggled to maintain their pace while controlling my breathing, a technique they employed to avoid inhaling toxic gases. The discipline required was similar to meditation practices I had learned during theological training, focusing on slow, measured breaths while maintaining awareness of surroundings. Kale noticed my relative success and commented, "Your prayer breathing useful here. First-time Emperor training helps survival." The observation was not reconciliation, merely factual acknowledgement. But it suggested he no longer considered me purely liability. The skills developed through religious discipline had practical application, even if the religious content itself remained worthless in survival terms. On the 7th day, we encountered another group of Vorago-born traveling toward the same canyon refuge. Their population was larger, perhaps 500 individuals, and they carried themselves with confidence, suggesting greater resources and experience. The two groups met warily, weapons ready but not raised, leadership from both sides conferring in rapid conversation. Mara negotiated our temporary alliance. The canyon region could support both populations during dry season, she explained to me later, and cooperation during the journey reduced predation losses for both groups. Once we reached the canyon, each group would maintain separate territories, but share intelligence about threats and coordinate defensive efforts when necessary. The merged population continued toward the canyon, now numbering approximately 700 humans. I found myself studying the other group with anthropological interest, noting differences in equipment, scarring patterns, and social organization. They had clearly encountered Imperial presence before. Several individuals wore scavenged equipment. A damaged helmet here, a section of flak armor there, boots that were clearly Imperial manufacture, though worn nearly to failure. One individual wore an ecclesiarchy rosette on a cord around his neck, the sacred symbol displayed as mere decoration. The sight disturbed me profoundly. That rosette had belonged to a missionary, someone like me who had come to bring faith and had instead provided only scavenged materials. I approached the wearer, a middle-aged man whose scarred face suggested he had survived decades on Vorago Prime. Through gesture and our limited shared language, I asked about the rosette's origin. He understood immediately, touching the symbol with casual familiarity. "Sky fallen," he said. "Many seasons passed. Came with much equipment, many words about Emperor. Stayed 2 years, good with injuries, taught useful things. Died during fire season, refused to run, stayed with metal things." He tapped the rosette. "We kept. Strong metal, useful for tool making if needed." The casual way he described my predecessor's death, the complete absence of recognition that the rosette held religious significance, the pragmatic assessment that it was primarily valuable as potential raw material, all of this crystallized the fundamental disconnect between my faith and their reality. To them, missionaries were simply unusual visitors who sometimes provided useful knowledge before inevitably dying through poor survival decisions. I asked if I could see any other materials that had belonged to the previous missionary. The man led me to where his group stored communal equipment. Among the various scavenged items were 3 journals, their pages water-damaged and partially destroyed but still partially legible. He offered them to me without hesitation. "May be useful for you. Same words you speak. We cannot read. Sky fallen marks." That evening, while the merged population made camp in a relatively secure rocky area, I read my predecessor's journals by the light of my glow globe. The handwriting was precise initially, each entry carefully dated and formatted according to ecclesiarchy standards. The early entries radiated confidence and faith. Day 37. Successful contact established with indigenous population. They show remarkable intelligence and adaptability. Initial conversion efforts proceeding slowly but steadily. The Emperor's light will illuminate even this dark world. Day 92. Frustration growing. They learn prayers and rituals readily but without genuine comprehension. Perhaps I am not explaining clearly enough. Will redouble efforts and focus on demonstrating faith through personal example. The middle entries showed cracks forming in certainty. Day 216. Question that troubles me. If the Emperor truly protects the faithful, why have I witnessed faithful people die while those who never pray survive? The indigenous people prosper through competence, not devotion. Am I witnessing failure of my missionary work, or failure of theological principles I was taught? Day 341. Spent evening debating with tribal elder about nature of divine protection. She asked simple question. Show me protection. I could not. Every example I provided of Emperor's intercession, she countered with mundane explanation. Rain ending when I prayed was simply weather pattern. My survival of predator attack was due to her people's intervention, not divine power. How do I prove faith when everything attributed to Emperor can be equally attributed to natural causes or human action? The later entries descended into desperation and rationalization. Day 512. Perhaps faith is being tested here. Perhaps Vorago Prime exists specifically to challenge and refine belief. Those who maintain certainty despite evidence will be rewarded. I must not falter. Doubt is heresy. Day 683. They are evacuating for fire season. Massive brush fire approaching, visible on horizon. They insist I abandon the portable shrine and missionary equipment. But if I abandon the Emperor's symbols, what remains of my purpose? If I choose survival over faith, I choose nothing over everything. I will stay. I will trust. The Emperor protects those who demonstrate ultimate faith. The final entry was brief and written in shaking script. Day 684. Fire visible. Heat intense. Still time to run. But running is admission that faith fails. I will stay. I will prove the Emperor protects. If I am wrong, may the next missionary learn from my example. The flesh is weak, but faith endures. There were no further entries. My predecessor had burned to death rather than admit that faith provided no protection against natural disaster. The Vorago-born had returned after the fire passed, recovered the metal equipment that survived, and moved on with their lives. Another sky fallen dead through poor decisions, nothing more remarkable than any other death on Vorago Prime. I closed the journals and sat in darkness, my glow globe extinguished to conserve power. Around me, the Vorago-born settled into sleep, sentries posted to watch for nighttime predators. Their rest was not peaceful, but it was efficient, bodies recovering energy for the next day's travel. They did not pray before sleeping. They did not ask for divine protection through the night. They simply slept, confident that their sentries and defenses were adequate, or accepting that death might come regardless. Kale approached my position, moving silently until he sat beside me. We had not spoken extensively since the Night Hunter incident, maintaining polite distance. You read sky fallen marks, he observed. What do they say? They say the previous missionary died choosing faith over survival, I replied. Believed the Emperor would protect them from fire if they demonstrated sufficient devotion. The fire killed them anyway. Kale was silent for a long moment. And you? You choose same? The question was direct and deserved honest answer. I don't know, I admitted. Everything I was taught says faith should be chosen above survival, that the Emperor values those who trust him absolutely. But I have seen no evidence that trust produces protection. I have seen faithful people die while practical people survive. Then why continue? Kale asked. Why speak Emperor words if words do nothing? Because without faith, I am nothing, I said, articulating the fear that had grown in me since landing on Vorago Prime. My entire life has been devoted to the Emperor. My training, my purpose, my identity, all depend on faith being true. If I abandon faith, what remains? What am I? Kael considered this carefully, as he considered all things. You are a person who can heal injuries, who knows useful things, who is learning to survive. Faith or no faith, these things remain. You think removing belief removes person, but person is actions, not thoughts. You are what you do, not what you believe. His philosophy was so alien to my shrine world upbringing that processing it required conscious effort. On Ophelia 7, belief defined identity, absolutely. What you believed determined your social position, your purpose, your value. Actions flowed from belief and had meaning only in theological context. But Kael described the opposite. Identity emerging from action, belief as secondary or even irrelevant to personhood. On your world, I said slowly, does anyone believe in anything beyond immediate survival? We believe in each other, Kael replied. We believe competence is valuable. We believe teaching children survival knowledge is important. We believe protecting community benefits all. Many beliefs. Just not beliefs about sky gods or souls or afterlife. Those beliefs do not help survival. But they provide meaning, I protested. Purpose beyond mere existence. Survival is not mere, Kael said with quiet intensity. Survival is everything. We give meaning to survival through how we survive. Teaching child to read danger signs gives meaning. Sharing food with injured person gives meaning. Remembering dead by keeping their knowledge alive gives meaning. We do not need Emperor to make life meaningful. Life is already meaningful because we choose to make it so. The conversation ended there. Both of us, too, exhausted for further philosophical debate. But Kael's words remained with me through the remaining days of travel, competing with the theological certainty that had structured my entire existence. The canyon refuge revealed itself gradually as we descended through rocky terrain that had grown increasingly barren over the final days of travel. From above, the canyon appeared as merely a deep crack in Vorago Prime's tortured surface. But as we descended the treacherous path carved by generations of seasonal migration, the true scope became apparent. The canyon stretched for kilometers, its walls rising 300 meters on either side, and at its base flowed a river fed by underground sources that never fully dried even during the worst droughts. The Vorago-born had established semi-permanent structures here, shelters built into cave systems along the canyon walls that offered protection from both predators and the intense heat that built during dry season days. The merged population divided territory through negotiation. Mara's group claiming the northern section, while the larger group occupied the south. Water was shared equally. Hunting territories respected. Disputes resolved through council rather than violence. I established myself in a small cave near Mara's dwelling, unpacking my remaining equipment and attempting to create some semblance of order. The missionary texts had survived the journey relatively intact. My bolt pistol remained functional, despite constant humidity and dust exposure. The medical supplies were depleted, but adequate for basic treatment. The Voxcaster, damaged since landing, I had carried out of habit rather than hope it might function. The canyon's relative stability allowed resumption of something approaching routine. I attempted services again, though attendance was sparse and consisted primarily of children seeking entertainment rather than spiritual enlightenment. The adults tolerated my prayers, but did not participate. I had become background element of their existence, present but irrelevant to daily survival. 3 weeks into our canyon residence, the sky changed. Not with weather patterns the Vorago-born recognized, but with something else entirely. A massive distortion high in the atmosphere, visible as a dark spot that grew with terrifying speed. I watched with growing dread as the object descended, trailing fire and smoke, until it impacted somewhere beyond the western horizon, with force sufficient to shake the canyon walls and send flocks of flying creatures into panicked flight. The Vorago-born had no context for what had just occurred, but I did. Something had entered Vorago Prime's atmosphere under power, had crashed with the force of a small meteor. Given the trajectory and speed, only one possibility seemed likely: a ship. But what kind of ship would crash land on a death world with such violence? The answer came 2 days later when the first Orc scouts reached the canyon region. I was near the river when I heard the distinctive sounds of their approach: guttural roaring, crude weapons discharging, and the thundering footfalls of beings that seemed to care nothing for stealth. 3 of them emerged from the canyon's eastern approach. Green-skinned monsters standing as tall as space marines, but broader, more heavily muscled, their bodies seeming to bulge with barely contained violence. They carried weapons that defied logic. Crude assemblies of metal and wood that should not function but clearly did, firing projectiles with devastating effect. Their armor was scavenged plates held together by wire and apparent willpower. They looked at the canyon settlement not with hostility but with something far more disturbing: delight. They had found new sport. The Vorago-born responded instantly, not with panic but with practiced evacuation protocols. Hunters engaged the orcs from distance with thrown weapons and primitive bows, attempting to slow their advance while the rest of the population retreated deeper into the cave systems. I ran with them, my missionary robes snagging on rocks as we fled into darkness. The sounds of combat echoed through the canyon. Orc weapons discharged with cacophonous frequency, their bullets chewing through stone and flesh with equal disregard. I heard screams, both Vorago-born and Orc, as battle raged in the settlement we had just abandoned. The Orcs were laughing, their joy and violence apparent even through the chaos. We regrouped in a deep cave system that extended far into the canyon walls, a refuge known to the Vorago-born, but difficult to access without guidance. The population that gathered represented perhaps half of Mara's group. The rest were either dead, captured, or scattered throughout the canyon's many hiding places. Mara conducted rapid assessment, counting survivors and determining injuries. 17 dead in the initial attack, 9 seriously wounded, 43 unaccounted for, their fates unknown. The Orcs had devastated the settlement in minutes, demonstrating a lethality that far exceeded anything native to Vorago Prime. And this was merely a scouting party. If a full war band had crashed on the planet, the indigenous population faced potential extinction. Kyle found me huddled against the cave wall, trying to process what I had witnessed. "You know these things," he stated, rather than asked. "You recognized them." "Orcs," I said, the word tasting like ash. "Xenos species. Aggressive, warlike, nearly impossible to kill. They live for combat. A death world like Vorago would be entertainment for them, not threat. How do we fight them?" "You don't," I said flatly. "You hide. You run. You pray. They leave. Fighting orcs without proper weapons and training is suicide." Kale's expression hardened. "Then we die. Cannot hide forever in caves. They will find us eventually. Cannot run because entire planet is war zone now. And prayer does nothing, as you have shown repeatedly." His words stung precisely because they were accurate. Every solution my training provided was inadequate. The Vorago-born could not hide indefinitely. They could not evacuate to safety because no safety existed on this planet. They could not fight because orcs were transhuman killing machines. And prayer, as had been demonstrated conclusively, provided no protection whatsoever. But I knew something Kale did not. The Imperium maintained minimal presence in this system. The Penal Legion outpost on Vorago Prime's moon monitored the planet. If I could signal them, if I could repair the Voxcaster sufficiently to transmit distress, Imperial forces might intervene. Not to save the Vorago-born specifically, but to eliminate Orc presence before it became systemic threat. I explained this to Mara and the other survivors who had gathered to plan response. They did not fully comprehend the scale of forces I described. had no framework for understanding space marines or Imperial Navy vessels, but they understood the core concept. Powerful allies existed beyond the sky who might eliminate the orcs if properly contacted. "What do you need?" Mara asked simply. "Equipment from my original landing site," I said. "Tools to repair the Voxcaster, time to make the repairs, and protection while I work because the process will take days." Kael volunteered immediately to lead a retrieval expedition. Despite the danger, despite his justified anger toward me, he understood that contacting these sky powers represented the Vorago-born's only survival chance. 6 others joined him, hunters skilled enough to move through orc-infested territory with reasonable hope of success. They departed the next morning, leaving through passages too narrow for orc bodies to follow. I watched them disappear into darkness, carrying a list of specific items I needed and descriptions of where to find them. The chances of their survival, let alone success, were minimal. But minimal was better than none. While they were gone, I attempted to repair the Voxcaster using the limited tools available in the cave. The damage was extensive. Cracked casing, corroded circuits, power cell depleted nearly to failure. I worked by globe light, my hands shaking from exhaustion and fear, attempting repairs that would have challenged a trained tech priest. The other survivors watched with interest, but without understanding. To them, I was performing some form of technical ritual, manipulating components in ways they could not comprehend toward outcomes they could only hope would materialize. Several offered assistance, helping hold pieces steady or retrieving tools as needed. The collaboration was strangely comforting despite the desperate circumstances. Mara sat with me during the second night of repairs, her presence companionable rather than supervisory. "You have knowledge we do not," she observed. "Knowledge of sky things, of enemies from beyond. This knowledge is useful, more useful than Emperor words." "The Emperor's domain includes all human knowledge," I said reflexively, then stopped. The automatic defense of faith felt hollow. Or perhaps knowledge is simply knowledge, valuable regardless of source. "You change," Mara said. "When you arrived, you spoke only of Emperor, of faith, of souls. Now you speak of practical things, useful things. You become less sky-fallen, more person." The observation troubled me because it was accurate. I was changing, had been changing since arrival, but had refused to acknowledge it. The rigid certainty that had defined my identity was eroding, replaced by something I could not yet name. Pragmatism, perhaps, or simply desperate adaptation to circumstances that contradicted everything I believed. Kael's group returned on the 4th day, battered but alive. They carried the equipment I had requested. Spare parts from my drop pod, the portable shrine's power cells, tools and materials that survived in my original camp. 2 members of the expedition bore serious injuries. One had lost 3 fingers to orc gunfire. Another had been slashed across the chest by some native predator and was clearly infected despite field treatment. I treated their injuries using my remaining medical supplies, working with focus that excluded conscious thought. Clean the wounds, apply antiseptic, suture where necessary, administer antibiotics, bandage and immobilize. The procedures were mechanical, learned during Schola training, and practiced rarely. But they worked. Both wounded hunters would survive, though recovery would take weeks. Kael watched me work with an expression I could not interpret. When I finished, he said quietly, "You saved them, not with prayers, with knowledge and action. Why not do this always? Why spend time on useless words when useful actions exist?" "Because I was taught that faith was the highest form of action," I replied, exhaustion making me honest. That all other actions derived meaning from theological context. But perhaps I was taught wrong, or perhaps faith has different value in different contexts. I returned to the Voxcaster repairs with renewed determination. The components Kael's group retrieved made functional repair possible. I cannibalized the portable shrine's power cells, an act that would have been unthinkable months ago, using their energy storage to replace the Voxcaster's depleted cell. I jury-rigged circuits using wire salvaged from various sources. The result was inelegant, but potentially functional. When I finally powered the device on, my hands trembled so severely I could barely operate the controls. Static filled the cave, then fragments of voices, then suddenly clear signal as the Vox locked onto the Penal Legion outpost's frequency. "This is Missionary designation Epsilon 97, Sister Evangeline Maron, transmitting emergency distress," I said, voice cracking with relief and desperation. "Vorago Prime has been invaded by Orc forces. Xenos presence confirmed, indigenous population under attack, requesting immediate Imperial intervention." The response came after a delay that felt eternal. "Missionary Epsilon 97, we confirm your signal. Orc presence detected via orbital monitoring. Distress logged and forwarded to Sector Command. Estimated response time, 14 to 21 days. Can you confirm your location and status?" 14 to 21 days. Weeks during which the Orcs would hunt the Vorago-born to extinction. I provided coordinates and situation briefing, describing the indigenous population's plight and requesting extraction capability for survivors. The response was clinical. "Missionary extraction authorized. Indigenous population falls outside Imperial protection protocols. No evacuation resources will be allocated to non-Imperial citizens." The words froze me mid-transmission. "Clarify," I said slowly. "The indigenous humans are under Missionarius Galaxia protection. They fall within my missionary jurisdiction." "Negative," the response came. "Imperial citizenship requires formal conversion and documentation. Your mission logs indicate 0 successful conversions. Therefore, population is classified as uncontacted and non-Imperial. Standard protocol for Death World primitives. Missionary extraction only." I stared at the Voxcaster, understanding crystallizing with horrifying clarity. The indigenous population was disposable. The Imperium would eliminate the Orc threat because Orcs represented systemic danger. But the Vorago-born would receive no protection, no evacuation, no consideration beyond their utility as anthropological data. They were research subjects, not citizens. Their extinction was acceptable collateral damage, and my failure to convert them had sealed their fate. The Voxcaster continued its steady hum, awaiting my response. Around me, the Vorago-born watched expectantly, unable to understand the conversation but recognizing its importance from my expression. Mara stood closest, her weathered face showing hope for the first time since the Orcs arrived. That hope would shatter when I explained what the Imperium had decreed. "Repeat previous transmission," I said into the Vox, hoping I had misunderstood. "Confirmed." The response came with bureaucratic indifference. "Imperial resources allocated for Imperial citizens only. Your missionary jurisdiction extends to conversion efforts, not resource expenditure on non-converted populations. Standing orders for death. World indigenous populations. Observe. Document. Do not interfere with natural selection processes unless conversion is achieved." "Natural selection processes," I repeated, the euphemism's cruelty stunning in its casualness. "You mean their extinction by Orc predation?" "Affirmative. Orc presence will be eliminated when strike force arrives. Incidental casualties among indigenous population are acceptable within operational parameters. Prepare for extraction at designated coordinates. Transmit final missionary reports and documentation. Epsilon 97. Acknowledge orders." I could not speak. My throat had closed around words that refused to emerge. The Imperium I had served my entire life, the institution I believed existed to protect humanity across the galaxy, had just declared 700 humans expendable because they lacked proper documentation, because I had failed to convert them. because their souls were not officially recorded in ecclesiarchy ledgers. Kale touched my shoulder, breaking my paralysis. "What do sky powers say?" he asked. I explained as simply as possible, watching comprehension dawn on the faces around me. The powerful allies I had promised would come. They would eliminate the orcs. But they would not save the Vorago born. They would extract me and leave everyone else to die because proper forms had not been completed, because faith had not been demonstrated according to Imperial standards, because bureaucracy valued documentation over lives. Mara's expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted. "So we are not worth saving to your Emperor. We are nothing to sky powers." "No," I said desperately. "You are human. You deserve protection. This is wrong, but this is truth," Mara replied. "Skyfallen speaks truth finally. We survive or die by own strength. No sky powers will help. We expected this already. We survive Vorago without gods. We survive orcs same way." Her acceptance shamed me more than accusation would have. She had never believed in the Emperor's protection, had tried to tell me repeatedly that faith was valueless here, that only competence mattered. Now the Imperium itself confirmed her worldview. The Vorago-born were on their own, as they had always been. The Voxcaster crackled again. "Epsilon 97, acknowledge orders and prepare for extraction. Window opens in 18 days at coordinates transmission to follow." I looked at the device, at the Vorago-born watching me, at Kael, whose brother had died because of my prayers, at Mara, who had sheltered me despite knowing I brought no real value. 18 days until extraction. 18 days until I could leave this nightmare planet, return to the Imperium, resume my life within the ecclesiarchy's comfortable certainties. 18 days until I abandoned 700 humans to death because I had failed them. "Negative," I heard myself say. "I refuse extraction." Silence from the Vox. Then, "Repeat transmission. Did you refuse extraction?" "Affirmative. I am remaining with indigenous population, refusing extraction and remaining on Vorago Prime. Missionary Epsilon 97. Refusing extraction constitutes desertion from Missionarius Galaxia. Ecclesiastical consequences include excommunication, reclamation of all mission materials, and potential heresy charges. Confirm you understand consequences." "I understand and accept consequences," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "These humans need someone with knowledge of orc tactics and Imperial capabilities. I am staying. Your decision is logged. Extraction window will remain open if you reconsider." Epsilon 97, you are making catastrophic mistake. Acknowledge. I deactivated the Voxcaster without responding, severing connection to the Imperium I had served since childhood. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the cave stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to something that might have been respect. "You choose to stay," Mara said finally. "You choose us over sky powers." "I choose what is right over what is ordered," I replied, the words feeling simultaneously liberating and terrifying. "You are human. You deserve protection regardless of what bureaucrats decide. If the Imperium will not help you, then I will." Kael spoke next, his voice carrying an edge I had not heard before. "You can fight orcs? You have knowledge that helps us survive?" "Some knowledge," I admitted. "Orcs are dangerous but predictable. They are individuals, not coordinated like you. They fight for personal glory, not group survival. They can be manipulated, divided, trapped, and they are not adapted to Vorago Prime's environment the way you are. We can use that." Over the following hours, I shared everything I knew about orc psychology and tactics from my Shola training. Greenskins were aggressive, but not suicidal. They sought challenging fights, but would avoid obvious traps once they learned danger existed. Their equipment was crude but devastating when it functioned. Their social structure was based on size and strength, with larger orcs commanding smaller ones through physical dominance rather than tactical superiority. Most importantly, orcs were overconfident to the point of stupidity. They assumed their physical superiority guaranteed victory, which made them vulnerable to environmental hazards they would not perceive as threats. Vorago Prime was full of such hazards. The Vorago-born absorbed this information with intense focus, immediately understanding how to apply it. They knew their environment intimately, knew every predator's behavior pattern, every hazardous plant species, every unstable terrain feature. They began planning with efficiency that would have impressed Imperial Guard officers. Kale proposed using the canyon itself as a killing ground. The orcs had discovered the settlement, but did not yet understand the cave system's full extent. If the Vorago-born could lure orcs into specific areas, they could collapse tunnels, trigger rock slides, or direct them into territories claimed by the canyon's native apex predators. I contributed tactical analysis from my training. Orcs would pursue prey that appeared vulnerable but could escape. If hunters showed themselves briefly, then fled into prepared kill zones, the orcs would follow out of sheer competitive instinct. The greenskins would view the chase as sport, rather than recognizing it as trap. The planning consumed 3 days. Scouts ventured into orc-controlled territory, observing enemy numbers and behavior. The warband appeared to consist of approximately 60 orcs, a substantial force but not insurmountable given terrain advantages. They had established a crude camp near the canyon's western approach, using the crashed rock as a base. They sent out hunting parties of 3 to 5 individuals, seeking sport rather than sustenance. We prepared the first ambush carefully. Hunters identified a narrow section of canyon, where rockfall could be triggered from above. I taught them basic principles of explosive detonation, showing how my remaining medical supplies could be repurposed. Certain chemicals, when mixed and ignited, produced expanding gases that could shatter stone. The principle was crude but effective. 3 hunters volunteered as bait. Kale and 2 others skilled enough to evade orc pursuit. They painted themselves with mud for camouflage and carried nothing but climbing equipment. Their role was to be seen, to provoke chase, then to lead the orcs through the kill zone before escaping via routes too narrow for greenskin bodies. I watched from above as they approached the orc camp at dawn. Kyle exposed himself deliberately, threw rocks at the orcs to ensure they noticed him, then ran. 5 orcs took the bait immediately, roaring with delight at the prospect of hunting fast prey. They charged after Kale's group with the subtlety of avalanches, their heavy footfalls echoing through the canyon. The chase proceeded exactly as planned. Kale and the others stayed just ahead of the orcs, visible enough to maintain pursuit, but never close enough to be caught. They led the greenskins through the narrow canyon section where we waited above with boulders braced and ready. When the signal came, we triggered the collapse. Tons of rock fell on the orcs below. The sound was tremendous, a roar that seemed to shake the entire canyon. When the dust cleared, 4 orcs lay crushed beneath rubble. The 5th had avoided the collapse by chance and now looked up at us with expression mixing rage and respect. Before it could retaliate, Vorago-born hunters perched on the canyon walls drove spears into its body from multiple angles simultaneously. It died roaring defiance. 5 orcs dead, 55 remained, but the Vorago-born had proven that the invincible could be killed. Morale shifted from despair to grim determination. If 5 could die in ambush, more could die through sustained campaign. The war became a pattern of ambush and withdrawal. We never confronted orcs directly, never gave them the stand-up fight they desired. Instead, we led them into prepared kill zones, collapsed tunnels on them, drove them into territories where Vorago Prime's predators lurked. The canyon's apex predator, a massive reptilian creature the Vorago-born called Stonebreaker, killed 3 orcs who blundered into its nesting territory while pursuing fleeing hunters. I fought alongside them during these engagements, my bolt pistol finally serving its intended purpose. The weapon's mass-reactive rounds were devastating against orc physiology, each hit detonating inside their bodies with catastrophic effect. I was not skilled warrior. My accuracy was poor, and my tactical instincts were underdeveloped. But the Vorago-born positioned me where I could contribute most effectively. During one engagement, I saved Kale's life. An orc had cornered him in a collapsed section of tunnel, its crude axe raised for killing blow. I fired 3 shots in rapid succession, the first 2 missing entirely, but the third catching the orc in its thick skull. The creature collapsed, its momentum carrying it forward to crash at Kale's feet. He looked at me with surprise that transformed into something approaching gratitude. "You fight," he said simply. "Not pray, fight." Brother would have approved. The acknowledgement carried more weight than any theological praise I had received during my schola training. I had not saved Kale through faith or divine intervention. I had saved him through violence, through competent application of weapon against threat. The distinction felt significant in ways I could not fully articulate. The attrition warfare continued for 2 weeks. The orc numbers dwindled to approximately 40, then 30, then 25. But the Vorago-born paid their own price. 17 dead in various engagements, some from orc weapons, others from environmental hazards during ambushes, still others from predators drawn by the violence. Every death was mourned briefly, then processed pragmatically. The bodies could not be recovered from orc-controlled territory, so they became simply absent, their knowledge lost. On the 16th day after refusing extraction, the Voxcaster activated spontaneously. An inquisitorial override code, forcing transmission despite my deactivation. The voice that emerged was not the bored penal legion officer, but someone else. Someone whose authority required immediate attention. Sister Evangeline Maron. This is Inquisitor Covenant of the Ordo Xenos. I am in system to address the orc incursion. Your refusal of extraction and subsequent integration with indigenous population requires investigation. You will present yourself for interrogation within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in summary execution. Acknowledge. I acknowledged, accepting that my choices had consequences. But I would not regret them. I had chosen humans over bureaucracy, action over faith, competence over certainty. Whatever the Inquisitor decided, at least I would face judgment, knowing I had become something more useful than believer. I had become simply human. The Inquisitor's arrival came with surgical precision. A Valkyrie gunship descended into the canyon at coordinates transmitted via Vox, its engines creating windstorms that scattered loose debris and sent smaller creatures fleeing. The craft landed with machine efficiency, assault ramp dropping to reveal Inquisitor Covenant, accompanied by a squad of stormtroopers whose weapons tracked every movement with professional vigilance. Covenant was not what I expected. Most Inquisitors I had studied during Shola training were ancient, their bodies augmented beyond recognition, their presence dominating through sheer accumulated authority. Covenant was younger, perhaps only decades into their service, their augmentations minimal and their expressions suggesting pragmatism rather than zealotry. "Sister Evangeline," they said without preamble, "you have created an unusual situation. A missionary who refuses extraction, who integrates with non-converted populations, who actively participates in combat operations. This requires explanation." I explained, omitting nothing. My failure to convert the Vorago-born despite months of effort. The realization that faith provided no protection on this world. The orc invasion and the Imperium's refusal to evacuate indigenous humans. My choice to remain and provide tactical assistance rather than abandon them to extinction. Covenant listened without interruption. Their expression, unreadable. When I finished, they consulted a data slate, reviewing information I could not see. "Your missionary reports were transmitted automatically before your Vox damage," they said. "We have comprehensive documentation of your activities and observations. The Missionarius Galaxia finds your conversion rate unacceptable. but your anthropological data valuable. Anthropological data, I repeated. That was the true purpose, wasn't it? Not conversion, but documentation. The Imperium serves many purposes simultaneously, Covenant said, neither confirming nor denying. What concerns me is your current status. You have deserted your posting, integrated with primitives, and demonstrated questionable loyalty to Imperial authority. I understand, I said, but I will not regret choosing to protect human lives over bureaucratic protocols. Covenant studied me for a long moment. The Vorago-born interest me, they said finally. A population that has survived this death world for generations without Imperial support, without faith, purely through adaptation and competence. Their survival strategies could provide valuable intelligence for other frontier populations. I propose an arrangement. The arrangement was unprecedented but logical. I would remain on Vorago Prime as permanent observer, transmitting regular reports on Vorago-born survival techniques, environmental adaptation, and social organization. In exchange, the population would be granted provisional protected status, preventing Imperial interference, but also denying formal citizenship. I would be reclassified from missionary to research consultant, maintaining technical connection to the Imperium while living among the indigenous population. The compromise satisfied no one completely but provided survival for all parties. Covenant departed after 3 hours, their Valkyrie lifting into Vorago's hostile sky and leaving me standing in the canyon with my choice made permanent. The Vorago-born accepted my continuing presence without ceremony. I had proven useful during the Orc crisis. I would remain useful afterward. That was sufficient justification in their pragmatic worldview. The fact that I had sacrificed my position within the Imperium to stay meant less to them than the fact that I could still treat injuries and provide intelligence about potential outside threats. The years that followed transformed me in ways that made my initial arrival seem like ancient history. The rigid shrine world missionary became something else entirely. I learned to hunt, moving through the jungle with competence, if not the innate skill of the Vorago-born. I learned to read weather patterns, to distinguish between dangerous and merely uncomfortable environmental conditions. I learned their language fully, until I thought in their linguistic structures rather than translating from Gothic. My body changed as well. The constant physical demands, the diet of Vorago food, the environmental exposure all reshaped me. Muscles developed in patterns appropriate for climbing and extended movement. Scars accumulated, each marking a lesson learned through pain. My skin darkened from sun exposure during migrations. The soft shrine world flesh that had characterized me upon arrival was burned away, replaced by something harder and more durable. Kale became something like a brother, the relationship forged through shared danger and mutual respect earned rather than assumed. He taught me survival with patience he showed few others. When I made mistakes, he corrected without judgment. When I succeeded, he acknowledged without excessive praise. Our conversations ranged across topics, theological, practical, and philosophical. During one migration between canyon and jungle territories, years into my residency, Kale asked if I still believed in the Emperor. The question was not hostile, but genuinely curious. I don't know, I admitted. I know the Imperium exists. I know the Emperor exists in some form. Whether he is divine or simply powerful, whether he cares about individual humans or only humanity in aggregate, I cannot say. Faith requires certainty I no longer possess. But you are less troubled now than when you arrived, Kale observed. Then, losing faith would destroy you. Now you live without it. He was correct. The existential terror that had accompanied my early doubts had faded. Purpose no longer required theological justification. I helped the Vorago-born survive because their survival was inherently valuable, not because the Emperor commanded it, or because their souls needed saving. The shift in perspective had occurred gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day I realized I had not prayed in months and had not missed the practice. I still sent annual reports to the Inquisition, as required by our arrangement. Clinical documentation of survival strategies, population dynamics, environmental adaptation. The reports contained no theology, no missionary appeals, no attempts to frame the Vorago-born as candidates for conversion. They were simply humans surviving through remarkable competence in impossible conditions. That was sufficient. Mara died during my 5th year on Vorago, her body finally succumbing to accumulated damage from decades of survival. She passed quietly in her dwelling, surrounded by those who valued her knowledge and experience. There was no funeral ceremony, no prayers for her soul, no expectation of afterlife. Her knowledge was preserved through those she had taught. Her body was processed pragmatically. She had lived, contributed to community survival, and died. That was complete life by Vorago standards. I realized I had not offered prayers at her passing, had not even considered it appropriate. The omission troubled me briefly before I accepted it as further evidence of my transformation. Mara would not have wanted prayers. She would have wanted her knowledge preserved and applied. Honoring her memory meant learning from her example, not appealing to gods she had never believed existed. The Vorago-born population stabilized around 300 individuals during my residency. Losses balanced by births in the delicate equilibrium death worlds imposed. Children born during my time there knew me as simply another member of the community. Unusual in appearance and knowledge, but not fundamentally different. They learned survival from all adults equally, including me. I taught them to read and write in addition to practical survival skills, creating the first literate generation in Vorago-born history. The literacy served practical purposes. Recording seasonal patterns allowed better prediction of environmental shifts. Documenting predator behavior enabled more effective avoidance strategies. Creating maps of safe routes improved migration efficiency. Knowledge became artifact that could be preserved beyond individual memory, creating institutional continuity the Vorago-born had previously lacked. During my 8th year, a child asked me about the Emperor during a teaching session. The question was innocent, prompted by seeing the Aquila symbol on my remaining missionary equipment. I explained that many humans across the galaxy believed in a powerful being who protected humanity from enemies. The child asked if I believed this. "I believe in what I can see and verify," I replied. "I can see that helping each other provides protection. I can verify that knowledge and skill enable survival. Whether a distant emperor contributes to these things, I cannot say with certainty." The child accepted this answer without trouble. Having been raised to value demonstrated truth over asserted belief. The exchange reminded me how far I had traveled from the certainty-drunk missionary who had landed 9 years prior. I was no longer Sister Evangeline of the Missionarius Galaxia. I was simply Evangeline, member of the Vorago-born community, who happened to possess unusual knowledge and maintained communication with sky powers. My purpose was no longer conversion but contribution. My identity no longer required theological framework. I was what I did, not what I believed. And what I did was help humans survive in conditions that should have killed them. That was sufficient purpose. That was complete meaning. 10 years have passed since I landed on Vorago Prime, carrying faith like armor. That faith corroded under the weight of reality, dissolved by a world that recognizes only competence and punishes certainty. I came to save souls. Instead, this death world saved mine by destroying the illusions that had sustained me. The Vorago-born never converted. They did not need salvation because they were never lost. They needed only what I finally learned to provide: useful knowledge applied with honest hands. The Emperor may watch from his distant throne, but here his gaze holds no power. Vorago does not care about divine providence. Neither, anymore, do I. I still transmit reports, maintaining my tenuous connection to the Imperium. But my heart belongs here, to this community that values action over faith, adaptation over doctrine, survival over souls. I came as missionary. I remain as simply human. Perhaps that transformation is the only conversion that ever mattered.